The expensive wine in Nathan's glass sloshed dangerously as he gestured dramatically, recounting his latest triumph to our captivated family. The investors couldn't write the check fast enough, he boasted, his designer watch catching the light. $50 million, just like that. I took a small sip of my own wine, watching my mother beam at her stepson with undisguised pride. Dad was nodding along, thoroughly impressed by the young tech mogul he'd helped raise. Even my younger sister Emma was hanging on Nathan's every word. And it all started with Amanda's little idea, Nathan added, throwing me what he probably thought was a generous acknowledgement. Remember that conversation at Christmas 2 years ago? About personalized AI therapy? Who knew it would turn into something this big? My name is Amanda Chen, and at 32, I was watching my stepbrother take credit for a company that was secretly mostly mine. Not that Nathan or anyone else at this table knew that particular detail. It was just a rough concept, I said modestly, playing my part. You're the one who made it real. Nathan raised his glass in my direction. Here's to family inspiration. Though maybe next time come up with an idea you can actually execute yourself. Sis. The condescension in his voice made my mother wince, but I just smiled. If he only knew about the execution that had already taken place. 2 years ago, that Christmas conversation hadn't been the casual chat Nathan remembered. I'd spent months developing the AI therapy concept, creating detailed business plans, and even building a basic prototype. When I shared it with Nathan, I'd been looking for genuine feedback from someone I thought I could trust. Instead, 3 weeks later, he'd registered the company himself. Therapy was born, with Nathan Stewart as its founder and CEO. He even used the name I'd suggested. Did you really come up with the basic idea, Amanda? Emma asked, her eyes wide. That's so cool. Oh, it was nothing, I assured her, catching Nathan's sharp look. Just a vague concept. Nathan did all the real work. What Nathan didn't know was that while he'd been busy playing tech visionary, I'd been methodically acquiring control of his company through a complex network of shell corporations and investment vehicles. My phone buzzed quietly, a message from Marcus, my lawyer. Final paperwork filed. You now officially own 75.4% of Therapy through the holding companies. Congratulations. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to appreciate the irony of the situation. Nathan thought he was celebrating the biggest deal of his life, but he just unknowingly sold the majority of his company to me. The journey to this moment had started the day I discovered Nathan's betrayal. I'd been working late at my consulting job when a colleague sent me a link. Check out this hot new startup, right up your alley. There it was, my entire concept, down to the specific features I'd outlined, being presented by Nathan at a tech conference. He was using my slides, my research, even some of my code, all repackaged under his name. Most people would have confronted him immediately or sued for theft of intellectual property. But I knew better. Nathan had carefully covered his tracks, and our family dynamics made direct confrontation complicated. Mom had married Nathan's father when we were teenagers, and she'd spent years trying to blend our families seamlessly, so I chose a different path. While Nathan focused on being the charismatic face of Therapy, I worked quietly behind the scenes. My consulting job gave me connections to private equity firms and venture capitalists. I created a series of investment companies, each seemingly independent but all leading back to me. Every time Therapy needed funding, my shell companies were there, offering attractive terms. Nathan, ever confident in his own brilliance, never questioned why investors were so eager to buy in. He was too busy giving interviews and attending tech conferences to notice that each funding round diluted his ownership while strengthening mine. Everything okay in there? Mom called through the bathroom door, snapping me back to the present. Nathan's about to tell us about the expansion plans. Coming. I called back, checking my reflection in the mirror. The same soft-spoken, supportive stepsister Nathan had always underestimated looked back at me. I returned to the dining room just as Nathan was explaining his vision for the company's future. The acquiring company wants to take Therapy global, he announced. They're keeping me on as Chief Innovation Officer with a huge compensation package. That's wonderful, sweetheart, his father beamed. Always knew you had it in you. I caught Emma giving me a strange look. My younger sister had always been more perceptive than the rest of the family. Did you work with AI in your consulting job, Amanda? she asked innocently. Nathan's smile flickered slightly. Different kind of AI, he said quickly. Amanda's work was much more basic. If he only knew that my basic work had included developing most of the core technology his company now used. The patents were held by one of my shell companies, which had then licensed them to Therapy at suspiciously favorable rates. Actually, I said, deciding to push just a little. I'd love to hear more about the technical side of things, Nathan. How did you solve the privacy compliance issues we discussed that Christmas? I watched him squirm slightly before launching into a vague explanation that basically outlined the exact solution I detailed in my original business plan. The one he'd stolen. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus. Acquiring company wants to meet with all major shareholders next week. Time to decide how you want to handle this. That was the question, wasn't it? In a few days, Nathan would discover that his great exit wasn't quite what he thought. The company he believed he'd sold wasn't really his to sell. More wine, Amanda? Mom offered, noticing my distraction. No thanks, I smiled. I need to drive back to the city tonight. Early meeting tomorrow. Nathan couldn't resist another dig. Must be tough still working those long consulting hours. You should have been more entrepreneurial, like me. Taken some risks. I thought about the millions I'd spent quietly buying control of his company, the careful legal maneuvering, the years of patient planning while he took credit for my work. We can't all be visionary founders, I said mildly. Some of us have to do the detail work. Dad raised his glass. To Nathan, our family's first millionaire. Everyone clinked glasses enthusiastically. I participated in the toast while checking my calendar. The shareholders' meeting was in exactly 6 days. That's when Nathan would learn what detail work really meant. As dinner wrapped up, Nathan pulled me aside. Listen, sis, he said, his voice softening with what he probably thought was generosity. I feel bad about how things worked out. How about I throw some consulting work your way once the acquisition is complete? Small token of appreciation for the original idea. I looked at my stepbrother, successful, arrogant, completely unaware of what was coming, and felt an almost overwhelming urge to tell him everything. Instead, I just smiled. That's very thoughtful, Nathan. But let's see how the acquisition plays out first. He clapped me on the shoulder, already turning away. Your loss. But the offer stands. Family has to look out for each other, right? Right, I agreed softly. Family first. The conference room at Marcus's law firm felt too small for the tension it contained. I sat quietly at the end of the table, watching Nathan chat confidently with the acquiring company's executives. He hadn't even questioned my presence when I walked in, probably assumed I was there to take notes or provide administrative support. Before we proceed with final signatures, Marcus began, we need to review the shareholder structure of Therapy. He started distributing folders to everyone present. As you'll see, the ownership breakdown is somewhat different from what was initially presented. Nathan flipped open his folder casually, then froze. I watched the color drain from his face as he processed the information in front of him. This must be a mistake, he said, his voice tight. These numbers can't be right. The numbers are quite accurate, Marcus replied calmly. Through various investment vehicles, the majority shareholder of Therapy is actually Nova Holdings LC, which owns 75.4% of the company. I've never heard of Nova Holdings, Nathan snapped, shuffling through the papers. I own this company. I founded it. Actually, I said, speaking for the first time, Nova Holdings is my company. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan's head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine with a mix of confusion and dawning horror. What? He whispered. Perhaps we should take a brief recess, Marcus suggested smoothly. Give everyone a chance to review the documentation thoroughly. The acquiring company's executives nodded, looking somewhat bemused. They'd been briefed on the real ownership structure weeks ago. It was only Nathan who was in the dark. As soon as the door closed behind them, Nathan exploded. What the hell is this, Amanda? Some kind of joke? No joke, I said calmly. Every funding round, every investment, every major stock purchase over the past 2 years, they all trace back to companies I control. You never bothered to look too closely at your investors, did you? But that's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. I smiled. My consulting work paid better than you thought. And it's amazing what you can do with good credit and better lawyers when you have a solid business plan. The original business plan, actually. The one you took from my laptop that Christmas. His face went from pale to red. You can't prove that. I don't need to, I replied, opening my own folder. The ownership structure is legal and documented. You've been running my company all this time, Nathan. You just didn't know it. He slumped in his chair, the reality of the situation finally hitting him. Why? He asked finally. Why not just confront me when I started the company? Would you have listened? Would anyone? I leaned forward. You saw an opportunity and took it, never thinking I'd be capable of doing anything about it. That was your mistake. Does the family know? Not yet. Though I imagine dinner conversations will be interesting once they do. Marcus returned then, the other executives filing in behind him. Shall we continue? He asked professionally. The next hour was excruciating for Nathan. Every page he had to sign reminded him that he wasn't the brilliant success story he thought he was. His 15% ownership stake was worth a few million, but nothing close to the fortune he'd been bragging about. One more thing, I said as the meeting wound down. About your position as Chief Innovation Officer with the acquiring company. Nathan's head snapped up, fear in his eyes. You can keep it, I said quietly. You're good at being the face of things, at driving growth. Just remember who you're really working for now. The acquiring company's CEO nodded. We assumed you'd want him to stay on, given the family connection. Nathan stared at me, trying to process this unexpected mercy. Why would you let me stay? Because unlike you, I understand the value of using people's actual talents, I replied. You're a good salesman, Nathan, a good frontman. That's worth something, as long as you remember it's not worth everything. The meeting ended with Nathan shell-shocked and silent. As everyone filed out, he caught my arm. The family, he said quietly. You'll humiliate me in front of them, in front of my father. I thought about all the dinners I'd sat through, listening to him brag about his stolen success. About Mom's proud smiles, Dad's approving nods, Emma's hero worship. The truth will come out eventually, I said. But how and when, that depends on you. Over the next few weeks, the story of Therapy's acquisition made headlines in the tech world. Nathan was quoted in the press releases, still playing his role, but there was a new humility in his statements. Every interview had to be approved by the board, by me. The family found out gradually. Emma figured it out first, reading between the lines of the press coverage and connecting it to things she'd observed over the years. She showed up at my apartment one night, full of questions. You let him take credit all this time, she said, shaking her head. Why? Sometimes winning isn't about getting credit, I told her. It's about having control. Mom and Dad took longer to understand what had happened. The truth came out during another family dinner, this one much quieter than the celebration a few weeks earlier. I don't understand, Mom said, looking between Nathan and me. All this time. I stole her idea, Nathan admitted finally, staring at his plate. I took her work and claimed it as my own. And she outsmarted me completely. The silence that followed was heavy with years of assumptions and misjudgments. Dad looked like he aged a decade in minutes, realizing how wrong he'd been about both his stepchildren. The company is doing well, I said finally, breaking the tension. Nathan's staying on in a leadership role. Nothing has to change. Everything's already changed, Dad said quietly. He was right. The family dynamics shifted subtly but significantly after that. Nathan's boasting stopped. Instead of dismissing my opinions, he began actively seeking them. Mom started asking about my other projects, finally seeing me clearly instead of through the lens of Nathan's success. A year later, Therapy had expanded globally, helping millions of people access mental health support through AI technology. Nathan had grown into his role, actually earning respect instead of just assuming it. We developed a new kind of relationship, not quite friends, but no longer rivals. You could have destroyed me, he said during a rare moment of honesty after a board meeting. Why didn't you? I thought about it carefully before answering. Because this way, you have to live with knowing exactly who you are. And who I am. That's worth more than revenge. The lesson hadn't been cheap. It had cost millions to quietly take control of Therapy. But watching Nathan learn humility, seeing him actually grow into the success he'd once only pretended to be, made it worth every penny. Emma asked me once if I regretted not getting public credit for creating Therapy. I showed her the company's financial reports instead. Credit is for people who need others to believe in them. I told her, power is for people who believe in themselves. The family still has dinner together regularly, though the conversations are different now. Nathan talks less but says more. Mom asks better questions. Dad watches us both with new understanding. And I sit quietly, just as before. But now everyone knows that quiet doesn't mean powerless. Sometimes I catch Nathan looking at me during these dinners, still trying to figure out exactly how I did it. He'll never know all the details, the late nights planning, the careful financial maneuvers, the patience it took to let him think he was winning until the perfect moment. But he knows enough. Enough to understand that success isn't about who talks the loudest or claims credit the fastest. Sometimes it's about the quiet one at the end of the table, the one everyone underestimated, quietly building an empire while they were busy bragging about building a kingdom.
The mahogany-paneled study in my father's house felt smaller than I remembered, probably because Richard Hawthorne's ego had grown even larger over the years. The retired pharmaceutical executive sat behind his massive desk, surrounded by framed awards and photographs documenting his 40-year career in drug development. His latest acquisition, a crystal paperweight commemorating his induction into the industry's Hall of Fame, caught the afternoon light as he gestured dismissively in my direction. "Catherine, I've been patient with this medical school fantasy of yours, but it's time to face reality," he declared, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that had intimidated boardrooms for decades. "You're 29 years old, still playing around with entry-level hospital work when you could be building a real career in pharmaceutical development." I sat quietly in the leather chair across from his desk, the same spot where I'd received countless lectures throughout my childhood and adolescence. Today's intervention was familiar territory, another attempt to redirect my career path toward what he considered more suitable professional pursuits. "The pharmaceutical industry needs people with your scientific background," he continued, pulling out what appeared to be a prepared presentation folder. "I've arranged interviews with 3 different companies. Research coordinator positions, regulatory affairs specialist roles, even a potential track toward medical liaison work. Real careers with advancement opportunities." My stepmother, Patricia, nodded approvingly from her position near the window. As a former marketing executive for a major pharmaceutical company, she'd been recruited as an ally in my father's campaign to set me straight about my professional choices. "Your father's right, dear," Patricia added, her voice mixing false warmth with genuine concern. "Hospital work is fine for people who want steady employment, but you're capable of so much more. The pharmaceutical industry rewards intelligence and ambition, qualities you obviously possess." Richard leaned forward, his expression mixing paternal concern with businesslike pragmatism. "The thing is, Catherine, what you're doing now isn't real medicine. Your medical support staff essentially a very educated technician. Real doctors make independent clinical decisions, manage complex patient cases and generate significant income. You're following protocols created by other people." The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had spent months researching pharmaceutical career opportunities for someone he believed was trapped in entry-level medical work, completely unaware that his daughter was actually one of the youngest department heads in the hospital system's history. "I appreciate the research, Dad, but I'm satisfied with my current position," I replied diplomatically, though I knew this response would only intensify his efforts to enlighten me about my career limitations. "Satisfied?" Richard's voice rose slightly, his frustration evident. "Catherine, satisfaction doesn't build wealth or create professional legacy. Look around this room. Every award, every recognition represents strategic career decisions and ambitious goal setting. You're settling for mediocrity when you could be achieving excellence." Patricia joined the conversation with her own analysis of my professional shortcomings. "The healthcare industry is changing rapidly, Catherine. Artificial intelligence is replacing basic diagnostic work, nurse practitioners are handling routine patient care, and hospitals are consolidating to reduce costs. If you don't position yourself strategically, you'll be left behind." My phone buzzed with a text from my chief of staff. "Emergency surgery scheduled for Monday. Patient is high profile, requires department head approval. Media attention expected." I glanced at the message briefly before returning my attention to my father's career counseling session. The opportunities I've identified would triple your current salary within 5 years, Richard continued, spreading pharmaceutical industry salary surveys across his desk. Medical Affairs Director, Clinical Research Manager, Regulatory Compliance Specialist. These are positions with real growth potential and professional prestige. Dad, I understand your concerns, but I'm not interested in leaving clinical medicine, I said, knowing this response would prompt his most passionate arguments about my lack of ambition. Richard's face reddened slightly, his patience clearly wearing thin. Catherine, you're not practicing clinical medicine. You're following orders, implementing treatment plans created by real doctors, and providing basic patient care. There's nothing wrong with that work, but it's not what I paid for when I funded your medical education. The conversation continued in this familiar pattern for another hour, with my father presenting increasingly compelling arguments for why I should abandon hospital work in favor of pharmaceutical industry opportunities. He'd clearly invested significant time researching salary ranges, career advancement tracks, and industry growth projections. Through it all, I maintained my composure, occasionally asking questions about the positions he'd identified or requesting clarification about specific pharmaceutical companies. The truth was far more complex than he could imagine, but his assumptions about my professional life had become so deeply entrenched that contradicting them seemed futile. Our discussion was interrupted by an urgent knock at the front door. Patricia answered, returning moments later with a concerned expression and a business card in her hand. Richard, there's a Dr. Stevens here to see you. He says it's urgent and relates to your cardiac test results from last week. My father's confident demeanor shifted immediately. The chest pains and irregular heartbeat that had prompted his recent cardiologist visit had been weighing on his mind, though he'd been dismissing them as stress-related symptoms that would resolve once he retired completely from consulting work. Dr. Stevens entered the study, his expression serious as he reviewed the medical file in his hands. I recognized him as one of the senior cardiologists at Metropolitan General, though my father had no reason to know about my professional relationship with his medical team. Mr. Hawthorne, I've reviewed your stress test results and cardiac imaging studies, Dr. Stevens began, his voice carrying the measured tone doctors use when delivering concerning news. You have significant blockages in 3 coronary arteries. This requires immediate surgical intervention. Richard's face went pale as he processed the diagnosis. What kind of surgery? How serious is this? Triple bypass surgery, possibly with valve replacement depending on what we find during the procedure. It's complex cardiac surgery that will require several hours in the operating room and extensive recovery time. The good news is that we have excellent success rates for these procedures when performed by our cardiac surgery team. Patricia moved to Richard's side, her marketing executive composure cracking as she grasped the gravity of the situation. Doctor, what are the risks? How soon does this need to happen? We need to schedule surgery within the next week. However, given the complexity and cost of the procedure, approximately $400,000, it requires approval from our Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery. Dr. Hawthorne will need authorization from the department head before we can proceed. Richard, still reeling from the diagnosis, focused on the administrative aspect of his medical crisis. How long does that approval process take? I need this surgery as soon as possible. Dr. Stevens consulted his tablet, checking the surgery schedule and approval timeline. Actually, I have good news on that front. Our department head happens to be available this afternoon. Dr. Catherine Hawthorne can review your case immediately if you'd like to proceed. The silence that followed was profound. Richard stared at Dr. Stevens with an expression of complete confusion, while Patricia looked back and forth between the cardiologist and me as if trying to solve a complex puzzle. Dr. Catherine Hawthorne? Richard whispered. But that's my daughter. Catherine, you're not a department head. You're medical support staff. Dr. Stevens looked genuinely puzzled by the confusion. Sir, Dr. Hawthorne is our chief of cardiothoracic surgery and department head. She's one of the most respected cardiac surgeons in the region, and she'll be personally overseeing your surgical team. I stood up from my chair, accepting the medical files Dr. Stevens handed me. As I reviewed my father's test results, cardiac imaging, and surgical recommendations, I could feel his stare burning into me. The blockages are significant but operable, I said clinically, studying his coronary angiogram with the practiced eye of someone who'd reviewed thousands of similar cases. triple bypass with possible mitral valve repair. Dr. Stevens' surgical plan is appropriate, though I'd recommend adding a MACE procedure to address the atrial fibrillation shown on your EKG. Richard's mouth opened and closed soundlessly as he watched me discuss his cardiac surgery with the clinical authority of someone who performed these procedures regularly. Dr. Hawthorne, Dr. Stevens said formally, given the patient's age and comorbidities, what's your assessment of surgical risk? Moderate risk but acceptable given the alternative, I replied, making notes on his chart. We'll want to optimize his cardiac medications preoperatively and ensure his diabetes is well controlled. I'll personally perform the surgery with Dr. Martinez assisting. As Dr. Stevens departed with my approval for the surgery, Richard and Patricia remained frozen in stunned silence. The afternoon that had begun with career counseling about abandoning my medical support work had suddenly transformed into something neither of them could have anticipated. Catherine, Richard's voice was barely audible, you're going to perform my heart surgery? I'm going to lead the surgical team that performs your heart surgery, yes. Dr. Martinez will assist and we'll have one of the best cardiac surgery teams in the country. Your prognosis is excellent. The truth began to unfold as my father processed this complete reversal of everything he thought he knew about my professional life. The entry-level hospital work he'd been encouraging me to abandon was actually the management of one of the region's premier cardiac surgery programs. The medical support role he'd dismissed was actually a position that required me to make life-and-death decisions for hundreds of patients annually. But Catherine, how long have you been a department head? How long have you been performing heart surgery? Patricia asked, her marketing background driving her need for concrete details. I've been chief of cardiothoracic surgery for 3 years and I've been performing cardiac surgery for 5 years. I complete approximately 200 major cardiac procedures annually, including some of the most complex cases in the region. Richard sat back in his chair, his pharmaceutical industry achievements suddenly seeming modest compared to his daughter's medical accomplishments. Catherine, why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were just following other doctors' orders? Dad, I tried to explain my work many times. Every time I mentioned cardiac surgery or department management, you redirected the conversation toward pharmaceutical industry opportunities. You'd already decided what my career looked like before you bothered to learn what it actually involved. Over the following week, as Richard prepared for his surgery, more details emerged about my actual professional life. The medical journals in my apartment weren't light reading. They contained my published research on cardiac surgical techniques. The conferences I attended weren't networking events. They were presentations of my clinical innovations to other cardiac surgeons. The irregular schedule they'd been concerned about was the result of managing emergency cardiac surgeries and leading a department of 37 medical professionals. The surgery went perfectly. Richard's recovery was uncomplicated, thanks to the surgical techniques I'd developed and the postoperative care protocols implemented by my team. As he recuperated in the cardiac intensive care unit, a facility I'd helped design during the hospital's recent expansion, he had plenty of time to reflect on the irony of his situation. Catherine, he said during one of my postoperative visits, I can't believe I spent months trying to convince you to leave medicine while you were saving people's lives every day. Dad, you weren't wrong about the pharmaceutical industry offering good opportunities. You were wrong about assuming I wasn't already pursuing opportunities that aligned with my interests and abilities. Patricia, who had researched cardiac surgery success rates during Richard's recovery, approached me with newfound respect and more than a little embarrassment. Catherine, I had no idea that cardiac surgery was so complex and specialized. The research I've done suggests that very few surgeons achieve the success rates your department maintains. It's challenging work, but it's what I love doing, I replied, checking Richard's surgical incisions and reviewing his cardiac rehabilitation plan. The experience transformed our family dynamic completely. Richard's retirement from pharmaceutical consulting suddenly seemed less significant compared to his daughter's career saving lives through cardiac surgery. The quarterly family business discussions that had focused on my career limitations now included genuine curiosity about medical innovations and cardiac surgery developments. But what affected my father most was the realization that while he'd built a successful career developing drugs to treat diseases, his daughter was directly saving lives by performing complex surgical procedures on the human heart. The medical support work he'd dismissed was actually more challenging and impactful than anything he'd accomplished during his pharmaceutical industry career. Some father-daughter relationships are complicated by different definitions of success and achievement. Ours was simplified by the recognition that the daughter he'd been trying to redirect toward better opportunities had already found her calling in work that literally meant life or death for hundreds of patients every year. As Richard completed his cardiac rehabilitation and returned to full activity, he often reflected on the strange irony of our relationship. He'd spent decades in the pharmaceutical industry, proud of his contributions to drug development and regulatory affairs. But when his own life was threatened by cardiac disease, it was his daughter, the one whose career he'd questioned, who saved him. The next time someone suggests that hospital work isn't real medicine, Richard has a very different perspective to offer. He knows firsthand that sometimes the most important medical work happens in operating rooms, performed by surgeons whose hands hold the literal power of life and death. The marble lobby of the Alexandria sparkled as my sister Caroline twirled her new key card, her designer heels clicking against the floor that would soon be under new management. "Can you believe Dad left me the penthouse?" She smirked, adjusting her Hermes scarf. "I mean, obviously he would, but still." I checked my watch, and my phone's countdown timer. "Obviously," I echoed, thinking of the document sitting in my inbox. "Transfer of building ownership complete." "Don't worry," Caroline patted my arm condescendingly. "Your office job probably pays enough for one of the lower floor units. Eventually." If she only knew that my tiny office job was running one of the city's largest real estate investment firms under a different name. "The view is simply incredible," she continued, pressing the penthouse button. "You should see how the city looks from the top." "Oh wait." She laughed. "You can't. Penthouse access only." My phone buzzed. System update initiating. All keycards recoding in 3, 2, 1. The elevator lights flickered. Caroline's keycard beeped red. "What the?" She swiped again. "Nothing. Must be a glitch. I'll have maintenance fix it." "About that," I smiled, pulling out my own keycard, sleek black with owner embossed in silver. "Maintenance reports to me now." "You? But..." Her perfectly lined eyes widened as understanding dawned. "No. Yes." I swiped my card. The elevator purred to life. "While you were bragging about inheriting the penthouse, I was buying the entire building." "That's impossible. This is one of the most expensive properties in the city." "Was one of the most expensive," I corrected, "before I acquired it through my investment firm. The same firm you mocked as my cute little office job last Christmas." The lobby screens flickered to life with a new message. "Welcome to Alexandria Towers, under new ownership of Sterling Investments." "Sterling?" Caroline's voice cracked. "That's you. The very same company that's been buying half the city's premium real estate. The one Dad always wished he could partner with." I stepped into the elevator. Funny how he never knew his younger daughter was the CEO. But the penthouse is mine." "Dad's will." "Dad's will left you an apartment," I interrupted. "My building, my rules. And speaking of rules." I checked my phone. "Your rent's due next week. With the new market adjustment, of course." Caroline's face went pale. "Market adjustment. 30% increase. Standard for luxury properties in this area." I smiled sweetly. "Unless you'd prefer to explore our more affordable units on the lower floors?" The elevator doors began to close on her shocked expression. "Oh, and Caroline?" I called out. "The maintenance team starts at 7 a.m. Try not to sleep in. They'll need access to inspect all units." Owner's orders. As the elevator carried me to my new office, the entire floor above the penthouse, I watched through security cameras as Caroline frantically called Dad. But he couldn't help her now. The security feed showed Caroline pacing the lobby, her perfect composure cracking as she made call after call. Dad's voicemail. Mom's busy signal. Her lawyer's apologetic explanation that yes, the building sale was completely legal. My phone buzzed with a message from my executive team. Phase 2 ready. Renovations scheduled. Perfect timing. The lobby speakers crackled. "Attention residents. Please join us for a mandatory meeting regarding upcoming building changes. Attendance required to maintain tenancy." Caroline's head snapped up just as I stepped out of the elevator, now wearing my CO blazer instead of the little sister cardigan she was used to mocking. "You can't do this," she hissed. "This building is an institution." "An institution that just got a new owner," I replied, watching other residents filter into the lobby. "And a much-needed update." The presentation screen descended, displaying Sterling Investments' portfolio, billions in prime real estate, all acquired while my family thought I was working some entry-level office job. "Ladies and gentlemen," I addressed the gathering crowd, enjoying Caroline's growing horror. "Welcome to the new Alexandria. I'm Emma Sterling, or as some of you know me, Emma Carter." Caroline sank into a lobby chair as whispers spread. The sister she'd dismissed for years was now her landlord. "First order of business," I continued, "rent adjustments. Premium units like the penthouse will see the largest increases, reflecting true market value." "But that's my inheritance," Caroline burst out. "Correction," I smiled. "Your inheritance was a lease. My inheritance was the vision to build something bigger. While you were planning your penthouse decoration, I was planning a real estate empire." My phone lit up with another update. "Contractor teams ready. Renovation permits approved." Speaking of planning, I turned back to the residents. "The building will undergo extensive renovations. Top floors first. Penthouse residents may need to temporarily relocate to lower floors." Caroline's designer purse slipped from her fingers. "Lower floors? Like some common tenant?" I finished. "Yes, exactly like that. Welcome to market reality, sister dear." The screens displayed the renovation timeline. Caroline's beloved penthouse would be unusable for 6 months. "But where will I live?" she demanded. "We have a lovely unit available on the 3rd floor," I replied. "Near the garbage chute. Perfect for someone on an adjusted budget." Her face turned an interesting shade of red. "Dad will never allow." "Dad's not the owner anymore," I cut in. "In fact," I checked my phone, "he just got the notice that his private parking spot is being converted to a community garden." The residents tittered. They'd all seen Caroline's entitled behavior over the years. "Now," I continued, "let's discuss the new amenity fees. Penthouse residents will pay premium rates, naturally. Can't have the lower floors subsidizing luxury living anymore." Caroline fumbled with her phone, probably checking her bank balance. She'd never had to budget before. "Oh, and one more thing," I added. "All residents must now actually live in their units. No more using the penthouse for your weekly social media photo shoots while actually living in your boyfriend's downtown loft." The crowd gasped. Caroline's Instagram-perfect facade cracked completely. "You've been spying on me?" "No, just reviewing security footage. Standard procedure for new ownership." I smiled. The cameras caught so many interesting things. Like you sneaking in guests against building policy, hosting unauthorized parties. Those were charity events. Taking selfies is not charity, Caroline. But don't worry, you can still host events. There's a lovely community room on the 2nd floor, next to the laundromat. As the meeting continued, I outlined changes that would transform the building from a symbol of old money privilege to a modern, equitable living space. Caroline slumped lower in her chair with each announcement. Sometimes the best investment isn't in square footage. It's in watching reality finally catch up to those who never thought they'd have to face it. The next morning, I sat in my top-floor office, watching multiple screens display security feeds from around the building. Caroline had spent the night calling everyone she knew, trying to fight the inevitable. My phone buzzed with updates. Penthouse renovation crew arriving. New security protocols active. Caroline Carter. 3 failed entry attempts at private elevator. Right on cue, the lobby desk called. "Miss Sterling, your sister is demanding access to the private elevator. Says it's her birthright. Direct her to the public elevators," I replied. Like every other resident. Through the cameras, I watched Caroline's perfect blowout deflate as she stood among her neighbors, waiting for the regular elevator. Her Louboutins tapped an angry rhythm on the marble floor. My executive assistant, Marcus, entered with the morning briefing. The other residents are loving the new changes, especially the rent reductions for long-term tenants in the lower floors. Amazing how popularity shifts when you prioritize actual community over status, I mused, signing the final renovation approvals. The elevator camera showed Caroline trying to press the penthouse button, now deactivated for her access level. Her frustrated reflection in the mirrored walls was better than any revenge I could have planned. Miss Sterling, Marcus cleared his throat. Your parents are here. Perfect. Right on schedule. Send them up, I smiled. Let's see how they handle their youngest daughter's office job now. Mom burst in first, her tennis club outfit clashing with her distressed expression. Dad followed, his usual commanding presence diminished by confusion. Emma, Mom started, what is the meaning of this? Caroline says you're trying to evict her. Not evicting, I corrected, gesturing to my wall of screens. Just implementing standard building improvements. See. The displays showed architectural plans for the renovation. The penthouse suite being converted into 3 luxury units. But that's Caroline's home. Mom protested. Actually, I pulled up the ownership documents. It's my building. Every brick, every floor, every overpriced parking space. Dad stepped forward, banker's instincts kicking in. Sterling Investments. That's the firm that's been dominating the real estate market. The one I tried to partner with last year. The one that rejected your proposal? I smiled. Yes, that was an interesting meeting. You spent an hour explaining basic property management to your own daughter. His face paled. You're Emma Sterling? The very same. I turned my screens to show my company's portfolio. While you were grooming Caroline to inherit one apartment, I was building an empire. But your office job, Mom stammered, was running a billion-dollar investment firm. I pulled up more documents. Every time you mocked my tiny cubicle, I was acquiring another building. When Caroline bragged about her future penthouse, I was negotiating the purchase of this entire property. Through the security feed, we watched Caroline trying to argue with maintenance about her right to the private parking space. You let us believe. Dad's voice trailed off. I let you believe what you wanted to believe, I finished. It was easier than fighting your assumptions. Besides, I gestured to the empire around us. The results speak for themselves. My phone buzzed. Renovation team requesting penthouse access. Caroline Carter refusing to leave premises. Excuse me, I stood, straightening my designer suit, worth more than Caroline's entire wardrobe. I have a building to run. Marcus will show you out. When Dad? Those country club membership dues you've been struggling with? Consider them handled. I bought the club last week. As my parents left, shell-shocked and silent, I watched Caroline on the security feed, still arguing about her rights to the building's amenities. 1 month into the renovations, I stood in what used to be Caroline's penthouse, now gutted and being transformed into something more meaningful. The floor-to-ceiling windows still offered that spectacular city view. But soon, they'd serve 3 families instead of one socialite's Instagram backdrop. My phone buzzed with updates from Marcus. Caroline Carter moved to 3rd floor unit. Social media followers dropping after address change. Parents requesting family dinner meeting. The last one made me smile. Amazing how quickly dinner invitations came once they realized their struggling daughter was actually a real estate mogul. Miss Sterling, Marcus appeared at my side, tablet in hand. The Times wants to do a profile. Youngest real estate magnate transforms city's housing landscape. Before I could respond, the construction supervisor approached with fresh plans. The community garden is ready for approval. We've allocated the space from those premium parking spots. The ones Caroline used for her sports car collection? I checked the designs. Perfect. Let's add a children's learning center too. My phone lit up with another message, this time from Caroline herself. Can we talk? Please. After a month of tantrums, threats, and failed legal challenges, this was new. Send her up, I told Marcus. Let's see what humility looks like on her. Caroline arrived minutes later, looking strange in casual clothes instead of her usual designer wear. The construction noise made her wince. They're destroying everything, she said quietly. No, I corrected, they're building something better. Like I've been doing for years while you were planning your next charity gala. She walked to the windows, the same ones she'd bragged about in countless social media posts. Why didn't you tell us? About any of this. Would you have listened? I turned to face her. Between your penthouse plans and Dad's lectures about proper careers, when exactly should I have mentioned building a real estate empire? We thought. You thought I was failing, I finished. It was easier to let you think that while I worked. Every time you mocked my tiny office job, I acquired another property. While you planned penthouse parties, I planned community revivals. My phone buzzed again. Photos of the new community garden taking shape below. Did you know, I continued, that the third floor has better sunset views than the penthouse? You'd never noticed because you were too busy looking down on everyone. Caroline stared at the construction plans spread across what used to be her marble countertops. Is this what you're doing to all your buildings? Converting spaces of privilege into places of purpose? I nodded. Every property in my portfolio is being transformed. More units, better communities, actual sustainability instead of superficial luxury. And me? She asked softly. What's my place in your new empire? I studied my sister, really looked at her for the first time in years. Without the designer armor and entitled attitude, she seemed smaller. More real. That depends, I replied. The community center needs a coordinator. Someone who knows event planning, who understands social dynamics. But, I emphasized, it's actual work. No photo ops, no social media campaigns. Just genuine community building. You trust me with that? After everything. Trust is earned. I handed her the project proposal. Like everything else in my buildings now. Including residency. My phone lit up with another headline. Sterling Investments revolutionizes urban living. Luxury properties transformed into community spaces. The third floor unit, I added, stays at market rate. No family discounts. Your choice if you want to stay. Caroline clutched the proposal, looking around at the space that was once her inheritance and would soon be something more valuable. Sometimes, I said quietly, losing a penthouse makes room for gaining perspective. She nodded, understanding finally reaching her eyes. When can I start? Right now, I gestured to the construction. The community garden needs planning. Show me what you can do when you're building something real instead of just a social media presence. As Caroline left to begin her new role, her first real job, I watched the sunset through those famous windows. Sometimes the best success isn't in owning the view from the top, but in changing what that view represents. And sometimes the greatest luxury is watching others learn the value of what's below. The Richardson family boardroom hadn't changed in 40 years. The same mahogany table, the same leather chairs, the same oil painting of my grandfather founding Richardson Steel in 1952. Everything preserved in amber, including the mindset. I sat quietly at the far end, deliberately dressed in a simple black suit, while Dad paced at the head of the table. My brother James smirked from his executive VP chair, their matching signet rings glinting under the fluorescent lights. This is a waste of time, James declared. She knows nothing about steel. My hidden phone buzzed. Another update from my real office. The acquisition was proceeding perfectly. Alexandra, Dad began, using my full name as he always did when disappointed. We called this meeting to discuss your recent activities. My investment work, I clarified, checking my decoy phone, the basic model they were used to seeing. Playing with stocks, James scoffed. While we run a real business. Dad stopped pacing. We've heard rumors about you approaching our investors. Just market research, I said mildly, watching another notification flash. The trading algorithms were in position. Research? James laughed. What does a failed business major know about market research? I hadn't failed business school. I'd left early to start my investment firm after securing $100 million in seed funding. But they'd stopped listening to explanations years ago. The company's future is set, Dad declared. James will take over as CEO next quarter. The succession is planned. And you're not part of those plans, James added with satisfaction. My real phone, the one controlling billions in assets, vibrated silently in my blazer pocket. The final trades were ready. You've never understood steel, Dad continued. The real work, the manufacturing, the declining profits? I suggested quietly. The falling market share. James stood abruptly. How dare you? We had record numbers last quarter. After creative accounting, I noted. And deferred maintenance costs. Enough. Dad's fist hit the table. You're not welcome at this company, Alexandra. Not now, not ever. I opened my laptop, my real one, not the basic model they thought I owned. Interesting timing, Dad. Because as of 3 minutes ago, the boardroom phone rang, interrupting me. Dad snatched it up. What? His face went pale. What do you mean, massive stock purchases? By whom? I typed a final command, then turned my laptop to face them. By Quantum Capital. My investment firm. James lunged for his phone, frantically pulling up the stock ticker. This isn't possible. As of now, I continued calmly, Quantum Capital owns 51% of Richardson Steele's voting shares. We've been quietly acquiring them for months. Every time you mocked my playing with stocks, I was buying another piece of your company. Dad's signet ring knocked against the table as his hand trembled. You can't. Can't what? Understand Steele? Run a real business. I stood straightening my jacket. Interesting perspective from a company that just became my subsidiary. The boardroom doors opened as my real executive team entered, sharp suits, tablets, and expressions that made James's corporate swagger look like a child playing dress-up. Ms. Richardson, my CFO, nodded. The acquisition is complete. Shall we begin the restructuring? Restructuring? James choked. Yes, I smiled. Starting with the executive VP position. It seems we have some redundancies to address. Dad's face had turned the color of his precious steel beams. This is our company. I corrected gently. Now it's mine. Well, Quantum Capital's. Same thing really, since I own controlling interest. I checked my real phone as more notifications poured in. Oh, and the street's responding well to the change in management. Stocks up 12% already. The sound of James's executive nameplate hitting the floor echoed through the suddenly silent boardroom. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, I announced, gathering my things. I trust you'll both stay to hear the new direction for our company? Unless you'd rather go back to playing with steel, while I run the real business. The look on their faces as their world crumbled around them was worth every dismissive comment, every mocking laugh, every moment they'd underestimated me. The empire they'd tried to keep me from? I just bought it out from under them. And to think, just last Christmas, they'd given me a basic steelworker's safety helmet as a joke gift. Since you'll never get the executive suite, James had laughed. Now I picked up that same helmet from my bag, placing it on the boardroom table. You know what the difference is between me and you, James? I learned the business from the ground up, while studying the market. Every summer I worked the steel mills, watching, learning. Not just about steel but about finance, market trends, global dynamics. The helmet gleamed under the lights, a symbol of how thoroughly they'd underestimated my commitment to understanding their world before taking it over. The boardroom erupted into chaos as more notifications flooded their phones. James frantically called his broker while Dad stared at the stock ticker climbing higher on the wall screen. 15% gain, I noted casually. The market apparently likes the idea of modern management. Speaking of which, I pressed a button on my laptop. There go the succession plans. James's phone clattered to the table. My contract, my position, is under review, my CFO Sarah Chin confirmed. Along with all executive appointments, Ms. Richardson believes in earned positions, not inherited ones. You can't just walk in here and... Dad started. I just did, I cut him off. While you were protecting your outdated dynasty, I was building something bigger. Every investor you thought was loyal to you, they've been working with me for months. The boardroom doors opened again as Thomas Wright, head of the shareholders committee, entered looking apologetic. Sir, he addressed Dad, the emergency board meeting is starting. Though I suppose. He turned to me, we should address you now, Ms. Richardson. Right. Dad's face reddened. You knew about this. Quantum Capital's reputation is impressive, Wright replied carefully. When Ms. Richardson approached us with her modernization plan. Modernization. James exploded. She doesn't know the first thing about. About what? I interrupted, pulling up detailed schematics on the wall screen. About how the Miller plant is operating at 63% efficiency due to deferred maintenance. Or how the Chicago facility's automation is 3 generations behind our competitors. Perhaps the union contracts you've mismanaged. Dad sank into his chair. How did you know? I smiled. Those summer jobs in the mills you forced on me? I wasn't just learning steel production. I was building relationships, understanding weaknesses, seeing opportunities you missed while playing corporate dynasty. Sarah distributed tablets to the gathering board members. The full modernization proposal, including the Asian expansion plans and European merger details. Asia? Europe. James whispered. We don't have the capital. You don't, I confirmed. Quantum Capital does. While you were protecting your corner office, I was building a global investment empire. One that just absorbed Richardson Steel into something much bigger. Dad's phone rang, probably his old friend Charlie from the country club, discovering his golf buddy now answered to his daughter. The union representatives are waiting, Sarah reminded me. They're quite excited about the profit-sharing program you proposed. Profit-sharing? Dad's voice cracked. With the workers? My summer colleagues, I corrected. The ones who taught me more about this business than your executive meetings ever did. They're getting the raises you've denied for years. James finally found his voice. The family legacy will be preserved, I assured him. Just not the way you planned. Richardson Steel isn't dying, it's evolving. Into something bigger than your limited vision could imagine. The stock ticker caught everyone's attention as it jumped again. 20% gain, Sarah noted. The market believes in Ms. Richardson's leadership. Unlike some people in this room. Dad reached for his CEO nameplate. I built this company. No, I corrected gently. Grandfather built it. You inherited it. And nearly ran it into the ground with outdated methods and nepotistic management. The board members murmured in agreement, their tablets displaying years of declining metrics I'd carefully documented. Now, I continued, taking my place at the head of the table, shall we discuss the future of our company? The real future, not the family fantasy you've been clinging to. Our company? James protested weakly. My company, I stated firmly. Though you're welcome to stay in positions earned by merit, not birth. Starting from where I did, on the factory floor. The sound of his executive office keys hitting the table echoed like falling steel beams. Sarah distributed more documents. Your new contracts if you choose to stay. Including the family trust Ms. Richardson has established. Family trust. Dad looked up sharply. For members who embrace the new Richardson Steel, I explained. Those who prove they understand modern business, not just inherited privilege. The choice is yours. The boardroom filled with more executives and managers, all clutching tablets displaying my modernization plans. The future I'd designed while they thought I was playing with stocks was about to become their new reality. The global announcement goes live in 5 minutes, Sarah informed me. Steel markets worldwide are watching. I stood smoothing my jacket. Time to address our employees. All of them. I looked pointedly at Dad and James, including the new entry-level positions. Dad's signet ring, the symbol of his power, lay dull and meaningless on the table. But, we're family, he said quietly. Yes, I agreed. Which is why you're getting this chance at all. The next board meeting will be in my real office, the top floor of Quantum Tower downtown. The building James said was wasting space on investment firms. I paused at the door. Oh, and James, that safety helmet you gave me for Christmas? Keep it. You'll need it more than I will. The boardroom doors closed behind me, leaving them to contemplate their new existence in a world where their failed daughter now controlled not just their company, but their entire future. 3 hours later, I returned to the boardroom after my global press conference. The room's power dynamics had shifted seismically. The old oil painting of grandfather seemed to look down with new understanding at his descendants, one triumphant, two broken. Dad's CEO nameplate had been cleared away, along with James's executive vice president credentials. They sat in regular chairs now, still staring at their phones as Richardson Steel's stock continued its historic rise. The market's response has exceeded projections, I stated, settling into my new position at the head of the table. We're up 32%. Sarah. 35 now, she corrected, checking her tablet. Asian markets are responding enthusiastically to the modernization plans. European steel unions have requested priority meetings. All this time, Dad whispered. While we thought you were failing, I was succeeding beyond your limited imagination, I completed. Every family dinner I missed, every board meeting you banned me from, every mocking comment about my little investment hobby. I was building an empire that could swallow yours whole. James finally looked up from his phone. The Miller plant upgrades begin tomorrow, I confirmed. Along with the automation overhaul you claimed we couldn't afford. Amazing what proper capital management can accomplish. The unions, Dad said hollowly. The profit-sharing program has already been announced, Sarah provided. Worker productivity is projected to increase 40% under the new incentive structure. The same workers you claimed couldn't be trusted with company equity. The boardroom doors opened as Thomas Wright returned. Ms. Richardson, the Global Steel Consortium is waiting to discuss the Asian expansion. And the Commerce Secretary has requested an urgent call. The Commerce Secretary wants to talk about our hostile takeover? James's voice cracked. Among other things, I smiled. Though they're more interested in how our modernization plan will revitalize American steel production. Speaking of production, I turned to Dad. Those efficiency reports you've been hiding? They're being addressed. All of them. He reached weakly for files that were no longer his to control. Don't bother, I said. Sarah has already implemented new transparency protocols. No more creative accounting to hide declining metrics. The stock ticker beeped again, another record high. However, I continued, standing to survey my new domain. I'm not vindictive, just progressive. The transition packages Sarah provided contain opportunities for both of you. New positions earned through merit, not birth. But we're Richardsons, James protested. This is our company. Was your company, I corrected. Now it's part of something bigger. Your name might be Richardson, but your future depends on performance, not DNA. Dad found his executive voice one last time. The board fully supports the new direction, I finished. They've seen the numbers, the projections, the global potential. The age of family monarchy in steel is over. Welcome to modern business. Sarah distributed additional documents. Your new employment options, including conditional access to the Richardson Legacy Fund Ms. Richardson has established. Legacy Fund? Dad's eyes widened. Substantial resources, I confirmed, for family members who embrace merit-based advancement and modern business practices. Those who cling to outdated nepotism will find their opportunities limited. James clutched his former office keys. These changes are non-negotiable, I stated. Every decision, every promotion, every strategy will be based on performance metrics. Not birth order, not family name, not country club connections. I moved toward the door, pausing by grandfather's portrait. You know what he told me once? Steel isn't about tradition, it's about adaptation. He understood what you forgot. Success requires evolution. Alex, Dad called weakly. We didn't know. No, I agreed. You were too busy protecting your inheritance to see the future being built around you. But now you do. The next board meeting will be in my real office. The one controlling not just Richardson Steel but global industrial finance. I suggest you both arrive early. After all. I smiled. Your new entry-level positions require punctuality. The door closed behind me, leaving them in a boardroom that suddenly felt as outdated as their understanding of modern business. The empire they tried to keep me from? I'd transformed it into something they couldn't have imagined. In my command center at Quantum Tower, surrounded by screens showing my growing financial empire, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The safety helmet James had given me as a joke sat on my desk, a reminder that success isn't inherited, it's earned. And I'd earned every bit of their shocked faces as their corporate kingdom crumbled into my waiting hands.